Canada exercises its democratic right to make a change, welcoming a new government and new ideas to leadership. Welcome to Listen Up. I'm Lorna Dueck. The 39th Government of Canada has taken a gentle step to the right. An election which saw a 64% voter turnout produced moderate results that the nation wants a change. 124 seats for the Conservatives, 103 for the Liberals, 51 for the Quebec Separatist Party, the Bloc, 29 seats for the New Democrats. On the heels of defeat, Canada's former Prime Minister, Paul Martin, has announced he is resigning from his job as Liberal leader. Our new Prime Minister says, "Don't worry, Canada. The changes we make will be acceptable for all."
Canada, strong, united, independent, and free. I look forward to working with all of the parties and all of the members of Parliament to build consensus and move this country forward.
And there's been no shortage of analysis on how this new government will do. Commentators have varied from east to west, and here with his view, columnist and political broadcaster Michael Coren.
I think the election was pretty much an absolute disaster, actually.
And why are you making that conclusion?
The country is so divided. It's never been as divided between urban and rural, between east and west, between faith-based and secular, to an extent between rich and poor. The politicians are lying, as they so often do. It was bad for the Conservatives because they made no breakthrough at all in 416 in Toronto, barely any in 905. Outside of western cities, they have no real urban representation. Their only triumph really was Quebec. And they picked up a few more seats in Ontario, not enough. The Liberals, they're down to, they're a rump. The NDP wanted to go up to 20 or 22. They went up to about 17 or 18. And for the Bloc, it was, you know, for them, it was the worst night of all. Nobody did well. Even the Greens did badly.
Except to show that Canada did say we need a change.
Marginally. After all that corruption, some of the worst corruption in any Western democracy in the past 20 years, and the change was minimal. To re-elect Belinda Stronach, who is really, aside from the fact that the woman is not very intelligent, she has no proven ability, and money talks, that she would cross the floor for the most crass of reasons and maybe to get a cabinet position, and these people re-elect her because she dresses nicely?
No, Michael, I do think Belinda got elected because her local area believes she has power and influence, and obviously when you're an auto parts dealer in Canada of the size that Magna is, she's got influence, she's got credibility. I think you're being way too pessimistic about this.
Why?
Because it did show that there was a solidarity. I disagree with you. I think 905, that whole southern belt in Ontario, solidly came across as saying, we do want to change.
Oakville, for example, didn't. I mean, most of the victories were marginal. I think the Tories will lose several of those next time round. And the urbans, I live in Toronto. I mean, there is no Tory representation, whether you're a Tory or not. There is no Tory representation in the biggest city in this country.
Which is an alarming divide, like you're saying, urban and rural.
And you parachute a candidate in who hasn't lived in the country for 30 years, who says if he loses, he'll go back to teaching at Harvard. We don't even know what he stands for, and he's elected as an MP. Why are people voting? Look, it works for moral conservatives too. There are Liberal candidates who are very morally conservative who got in with 50% of the vote.
Yes.
The major cities in this country, there was no change. They didn't say we're rejecting liberalism. The West, I think, is I've spoken to Westerners, Western conservatives. They're not happy at this result. Yeah, there was one plausible debate during the election on daycare. But if he tries to push anything, if he tries to give more parental choice, the NDP and the Liberals will form. Some Liberals might vote against, which could help, but the Bloc obviously is obsessed with that issue. So I don't see how Harbour can achieve anything. Obviously, he won't touch the gay marriage issue, and he said he wouldn't touch the abortion issue. But what can he actually touch? I mean, he doesn't have a majority government. Liberal and NDP together, and they could still form a coalition. It's unlikely because you have those people like Dan McTagan, Tom Wappel, and others who will not vote with the Liberals on certain issues. But I can see another election before very long and no real change. My own riding, the NDP one, good candidate. I like her very much. I don't think she'll hold it next time round. But business as usual. The separatists did badly. That must be a good thing for Canada. You'll have a better relationship now between the Prime Minister and the American President. Obviously, a conservative like Stephen Harper, someone who's more pro-American, will get on with certainly a Republican administration in particular. So will that help us in the long run? Marginally, perhaps. We won't have the lunacy of Carolyn Parrish just insulting Americans. But when it gets down to the bureaucrats debating the issues, I don't think there'll be a huge difference.
When we come back, one of the strongest voices in understanding conservatism in Canada, Preston Manning.
I thought it was fantastic. I think we needed change, and my father was thrilled. He's absolutely pro-PC, and no, I think it's a good change.
I was pleased that it was a minority government.
I was not happy, so I wanted the NDP to get in, and I'm typically NDP, so I was fairly disappointed that they didn't get in.
It don't much matter to me, because really, they all lie.
Well, I'm not too versed with politics. It's my first year that I actually voted. So I did vote Liberal based on a couple of reasons. Just graduated, so I'm looking for work, things like that, and I kind of see where they're putting their money into, and it works for me.
I think the voters were so undecided, but they needed a change.
Listen Up is back evaluating the choices Canada made in electing a Conservative minority government for its next parliament, a decision that can't be examined without hearing from Alberta, where all 28 seats voted Conservative and sent one of their own as Prime Minister to Ottawa. It's a victory that Reform Party founder Preston Manning has spent decades working on in the back rooms of politics and in the front lines as leader of the opposition. He is a colleague, a longtime colleague of the new Prime Minister. From Calgary, Mr. Manning, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Lorna, for asking me to.
Well, you know this new Prime Minister better than many people. Tell us what we should expect to see from Mr. Harper.
Well, Stephen is a very cautious person. That's why Albertans find it so ridiculous that some of his opponents would suggest he's a wild radical with a hidden agenda. That's about the last thing that would describe Stephen. So I think his strongest area is public policy, the analysis of public problems and the devising of public policy solutions. That was the job he was originally hired for as a graduate student from the University of Calgary when Reform started out. And I think if he's given a chance in government to demonstrate that skill, that Canadians will be very impressed.
Okay, with the minority makeup of his government, will he have a chance to actually get any work done?
All the parties and all the members elected in this election have a vested interest in making that parliament work. I think Canadians want it to work, and this is going to have to mean freer voting. It's going to have to mean putting together temporary coalitions in the House to get things done. It's going to mean more crossover voting. But I think if those things are done, there's a strong incentive for those things to be done, that this Parliament can achieve a great deal.
What kind of expectations do you think the faith community is putting on his leadership?
Well, I think the faith community will put some very heavy demands on his leadership, but I think there's something that has to happen first, not just for the Conservatives, but for the whole country. I think we have to learn better how to discuss people's most deeply held values, including faith commitments, in the public arena in a way that is respectful, in a way that recognizes differences, but also in a way that does not just suppress the expression of these views because it will be a subject of attack by others. I think there was a lot of tension in this campaign of faith-oriented people in all parties, not just the Conservatives, feeling that they couldn't say what they really wanted to say because this would cause negative political repercussions. And until we find a way to be able to articulate faith perspectives in the public square in a way that's respectful but also does not attract fire and flack from political opponents, we're not going to get very far in bringing faith perspectives to bear on public policy or public issues.
Faith Today magazine took the initiative on getting written statements, and we've run those in earlier programs, and it was picked up by some of the larger news places, the Toronto Star, the Ottawa Citizen. So there was at least, and why don't we put up Mr. Harper's right here. Here is kind of the summary of how he feels about the role of faith in political life. The notion of separation of church and state refers to the state not interfering in religious practice and treating all faith communities impartially. It does not mean that faith has no place in public life or the public square. That to me says I'm open and I'm welcome to having this be part of Canadian political process.
Those statements are a step in the right direction. I think Canadians should ask of any candidate for public office, including leaders, what are your most deeply held values and how do they relate to your work as a legislator or as the member of a government or an opposition. And I think our leaders and our candidates should feel free to answer those questions and not draw attacks and ridicule because of them. So these statements were a step in the right direction. Let's just hope there's more of them.
Mr. Preston Manning, thank you very much. Your books document well the process of democracy, and your new work at the Manning Centre for Democracy is very interesting. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lorna.
Coming up, representatives of Canada's faith communities weigh in on what they hope to see coming from a new government.
We are optimistic about the future. We are optimistic that the party elected to power will keep the promises that they made.
I keep hearing bad things about Stephen Harper and how he's kind of going to take a lot away from Canadians. Like, he thinks he's going to become Americanized, and yeah, I don't trust him,
I'm just hoping that the changes that he's going to say he's going to do, that he's actually going to keep his promises. So I'm really hoping that that's the case.
I think he's going to do what he can to skirt around all of the issues that he was talking about. Yeah, because he has a habit of doing that, not giving you a straight answer when it comes down to the wire.
Listen Up is back, and joining us now in studio, we have a panel representing our Canadian faith communities. At the far end, we have Richard Landau, the founder of Interfaith Canada, a dialogue group bringing faith groups together. Abdul Hal Patel is the coordinator of the Islamic Council of Imams, and Stephen Adler is the public policy analyst for the Jewish Congress of Ontario. And welcome, gentlemen. It's great to have you here. What do you think is the #1 faith issue affecting this government? Imam, shall we start with you?
Yes, I think the same-sex marriage issue is no doubt the #1 thing that is affecting the
And do you have unity in your community on how they feel about this?
I would say 99% or 99.9% of the Muslims agree, opposed to the same-sex marriage.
There's no agreement, Stephen, in your community, is there?
I think the Jewish community of Canada faces the challenges of many Canadians, that we are divided amongst there. There are those who are adamantly in favor of the same-sex legislation. There are those who are adamantly opposed. But the notwithstanding clause issue that you brought up, it does open it. It is ironic that he's mentioned it with same-sex marriage, because if the Supreme Court were to rule that the only medical providers we could have in Canada is private health care, by removing the notwithstanding clause, that safety net has been removed. So he opened one can of worms by closing another by mentioning the notwithstanding clause.
All right. Okay, Imam Patel, I hesitate to bring it up, but it has made front page news in all of our newspapers, and that is that the Liberal government had issued a request for a report on polygamy, which would again be a freedom of religion issue that would head further. Your thoughts on that? Is that just a moot point, one small study that's going to now get brushed away, or is there going to be activism from communities, faith communities that practice polygamy, that it should come to Canada?
I think the report is more dealing with the social problem that we have, where women are left hung, even in the Muslim community. And I dare to say this, that some people would not like to discuss this on TV, that there are Muslim men who have more than one wife, Islamically, not legally.
Islamically in Canada.
In Canada.
That's currently
registered.
happening.
Yes. For example, if I if I found somebody who is also available in love with me or divorced and says, I need to marry this person. Now, legally, I cannot marry another one while my wife is there, but I can have someone perform Islamic marriage, the nikah as it's called, and doesn't require registration. For religiously, for me, it is okay to consummate that relationship.
Okay, but here you can see why it is so important that faith groups, we work together with public policy issues, because this is what, Richard, you mentioned this. There are complex social issues that are coming out of our faith communities that are also coming out of secular operations in the world, where we're saying things have gone too far. There has got to be some kind of way of moving this forward. And I guess I'd like to ask then, what does the activism look like that will be effective?
The activism would need further studies as to how we can sort of accept that in a society. But legalizing...
So you're saying we should accept that?
Well, I'm not saying legally. I said we need some more studies and research, because some of the women are left hung like this. They're without protection.
Oh, so when, I understand what
no
you're saying.
No income, no household.
No protection.
Because Canada doesn't legally recognize
exactly.
this.
So there is a need for...
Now, that should be a problem stopped at immigration.
Yeah, and not just immigration, here locally. I mean, people born and grew up here
are doing that as well.
Well, anybody can do it.
Listen Up returns with more after this.
Closed captioning provided by Duca Financial Services Credit Union. Discover more affordable banking at duca.com.
Going to be a lot like the States, just with what I've heard, his ties with the States, and mainly on against the gay marriages thing, and kind of being more conservative with issues that younger people are more liberal with, right? So that's a general consensus for the youth.
I believe he will. I think he'll make a very strong attempt. I think he's young. He's very focused, very intelligent. I think he will. I do.
I think one of the things that people of faith have experienced in recent years is a sensing that some of these issues, which are rather complex and large, are happening, they're coming to the fore far too quickly. There's no sober second thought around issues. You mentioned polygamy, euthanasia, which came up for private members to vote. All these issues, faith communities are saying, you know what, this is happening far too quickly. We need to really examine this. We don't need to have a gun pointed to our heads and have it pushed through. The other thing that faith communities are really interested in is the whole integrity of the process, the integrity of how government is being run, and that's an issue.
And this is a bottom line issue of what happens when we redefine marriage, because now we've opened up to a problem that you're saying as imams, you're not even equipped yet to deal with it. Stephen, you're trying to make a point.
Whenever we discuss a policy, and you brought up the public policy question, the knee-jerk reaction is to implement a quick policy that will seem to please everyone. The devil is always in the details, if I can use that expression.
Yes.
And it's the regulations that enforce the legislation, whether it be faith-based arbitration in Ontario to national defense policy across Canada. It is the details that people don't pay attention to, how it's going to be implemented.
And do you believe that's what faith communities can participate in then? And
I think that's something we have to participate in.
How do we get at that table?
Firstly, by being active and speaking to the politicians when the issue first arises, but also making the presentations to committee, being involved in the process, notifying our elected officials, but also when the legislation is introduced, come up with constructive criticism towards amending that legislation. If we can do that, then we will be heard.
For any policy like that, it needs public dialogue. And for polygamy or anything like that, for that matter, where women are affected or are the central figures in it, it had the women, are the Canadian women ready for such shared relationship?
So bottom line, though, you are saying...
So we need to involve the women input in here more than men.
Yes,
in this case.
Absolutely. But bottom line, we are even discussing the problem of what to do with polygamy because we rushed redefining marriage, and now we have it never came up on the table then that Muslim people were living with Islamic multiple marriges.
I think part of the problem is
a small number, but nobody has been charged.
I think part of the problem that you have government that likes to have religion involved when we can serve their agenda. So you have government that will have you involved with a post-tsunami interfaith event because it looks good on them, but when it comes to real substantial discussion around issues that matters to us, we don't have the input.
What is heartening to see is all of these different faith groups, we come together on certain issues. And if you don't want to lead an issue on your own, then join together and work together on that.
I would challenge the government to actually call upon the faith communities to deal with what appears to be one of the largest issues of the age, and that is the matter of ethics and ethics commissioners. We have more to say in our faith-based communities. We have more history, we have more scripture, we have more law, more case law about what is ethical behavior, what is ethics than do any other body. They should call upon us for advice on that.
All right, okay. Well, I will say, if you aren't a leader of a religious group or an organization, but you believe in the tenets of that thing, you should be taking out party memberships. It's just shocking how few Canadians take out party memberships, and that's where the involvement comes that you've all spoken about. Thank you for coming in today. Obviously, there's much more to discuss on how faith hopes to interact with the political process, but we appreciate the ideas that you've shared. Coming up, running on faith, candidates speak out on why God is the motivation for why they go to Ottawa. You are deeply enmeshing your faith with your political decisions. Am I right on that?
I believe so. I mean, I feel that my political stances are informed and instructed by my Christian faith, and I've always, found it somewhat curious that some mixtures of faith and politics attract more attention than others. How do we be self-consciously Christian in the political arena without intimations of an older time when, Christians kind of ruled the world in the Christendom context, because clearly people don't want to return to a Christendom paradigm, so I think we need to find a post-Christendom paradigm for faithful politics.
Stand on your faith, don't be intimidated into silence. There is an attempt by the liberal media in this country, there's an attempt by so many people themselves in politics to say, you can't reference your religious faith. There is a separation of church and state in this country. You can't talk about your religious beliefs in the House of Commons. That's nonsense. That's undemocratic. We have in this country freedom of religion. And I, as a Christian, Catholic, or any other person coming from a faith perspective, whatever that faith is, has every right to say, look, here's what my morals tell me, and I openly profess them.
I know you've been attacked for your motorcycle, for your leather, but I've never heard you being attacked for your faith. Is there something different about the kind of way you present your evangelicalism in political life?
Well, I think so, without sounding super spiritual, like you are self-righteous or one level above anybody else. But the important thing is to be able to say, yes, my faith is important to me, but I can still talk about these issues without getting glassy-eyed or looking like a complete radical in some areas.
Well, they could call this a bestseller, but it's free. It's Our Daily Bread, one of North America's most popular spiritual resources for the questions that affect your lives. Available for you at keypromises.org, no cost or obligation. Order your copy today. Listen Up would love to hear your views on how you feel about the political choices Canada has made. You can write to us at listenuptv.com. Give us your view, we'll post it on the following program. Here's a thought I have. How come we're in such a hurry to think there has to be wholesale change? Are small steps, a little bit at a time, part of the process of God inviting us to learn how to get along with each other and the process of how this world lives and works together? It's very easy to leave involvement to a few at the top of the pile, instead of boil down to the very essence of everyone doing our part to make sure for a better tomorrow. Just some closing thoughts on this week's look at the election landscape and the new day facing Canada. I'm Lorna Dueck.